All right, we are going to talk a little bit more about the history of communication. So I'm going to go ahead and move to show you my screen, and then we will see if I can do it. I can do it. There we go. Hello. For the vehicle owner. Let's see. Let's get this 10%. 10%. Okay. So you've just finished chapter 5. Chapter 5 is talking about the fact that we are going to be authentic, that we are going to be organic, that we're going to be real. What authentic means is we're not going to be fake. We're going to be who we are. Organic means that we're not going to force things to happen. We're not going to try to be funny and then wait for the laugh to happen. We're not going to try to be serious and then wait for the tears to happen. We're just going to let the story take us to the emotions that would happen naturally. And so this involves you not being selfish. You have to be a person who cares about the audience whenever you're crafting your audience. Another thing that I talked about in the video over chapter 5 is the fact that we are going to be storytellers. We're going to be gift givers. And so realize that whenever you're presenting this information to the audience, that it's a story, that it's a gift, and that we don't want to hear bad stories. No one likes to go to the movies and listen and watch a bad movie. No one likes to get socks for Christmas. And so we want to make sure that the speech that we give is not socks for Christmas, that it's not a bust of a movie. Instead, we want to give them a blockbuster of a movie. We want to give them the gift that they've always wanted, that they just didn't know about until the point where we gave them their speech. And so that means not being selfish, being a hard worker, making sure that we spend the appropriate amount of time on our speeches, that we actually prepare and we practice giving those speeches. And then most importantly, that we are truthful and honest in our presentations and in our speech writing. And so the way that we do that is we follow along with some of the things that we learned in terms of the history of communication. And we already talked about 30,000 plus years ago. Before this point, it began with a series of grunts and nonverbals where we would kind of just exactly mimic the other animals around us. That slowly changed into what we're seeing on the screen right now. Around 30,000 plus years ago, we started to have really codified spoken languages across the Middle East and across Africa and Europe. And those languages were very specific. They allowed for nuance. They allowed us to talk about things that you can't talk about in grunts. You can't talk about in nonverbals. So whenever you're limited to those animalistic communications, you can't talk about the future or the present because those things are abstract. They're not there in front of you. They're thoughts, they're ideas. You couldn't talk about those before. And so with the advent of language, we could suddenly. And then, as we've already discussed in our notes, we had cave art that happened around 30,000 years ago. If you notice with this particular cave art, I don't think I showed this one in class yet. I really like this one for a couple of reasons. Number one is it kind of looks like maybe there are some fighter planes from like a science fiction movie or something. I don't know what those are, but I really like them just because they kind of make me wonder like what's going on here. But also, are these people, what are they doing? To me, it looks like they're hunting. So then the question is, what are they hunting? Is this gigantic animal like the parent and they are hunting the babies? Or is this gigantic animal an example of this animal? I really don't know. And then the same thing down here, you can kind of see that these people down here are partying it up. It looks like they've actually caught one of those animals. These people are drinking. These people look like they're dancing or partying, and they obviously have their kill cooking on the fire. And so cave art was important because it allowed them to think abstractly, but more importantly, it allowed them to keep their messages available for other audiences outside of the lives of the people who sent those messages. And then about 5,000 years ago, we have written language. We talked about cuneiform already with Sumeria, and those were on clay tablets. Then we talked about the Egyptian hieroglyphics, which were on stone. We talked about the benefits and the negatives of each one of those and how allowing us to write things down, allowed us to keep track of a bunch of different information, and to really plant the seeds for civilization. Because without that information, we wouldn't be able to keep careful track of food and feed all those people, and keep them safe. And of course, next we talk about papyrus, which led to paper. And then 2,100 years ago, paper was invented, paving the way for the greatest show ever, The Office. The Office is our favorite show. We watch it every night. It's playing before we go to bed, and it revolves around paper. And so paper is very, very important because it allowed people to make mistakes. It allowed people to think different ideas instead of just repeating something that they'd seen somewhere else, or making copies of something that was already written in stone. And as we spoke in class, making mistakes is one of the greatest things that can ever happen to a person, because we learn from our mistakes. We get better from our mistakes. And so the next thing that I want to talk about is 143 years ago, we have the invention of the telephone. And the telephone is important because it allows us to reach people all across the nation, all across the globe eventually. And so you could communicate instantly. So all of a sudden, you've taken distance and time and you've made them meaningless. The only problem with the phone back then would be it wouldn't have as crystal clear clarity as it does now, but also you would lose the nonverbals. So you can't see the people's faces, you can't see their body language, and that's a problem. But it's still a very, very neat invention in terms of communication. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn about the importance of telephone etiquette, and that's what we're going to discuss today.